microphone. Oh, okay. I cannot see that from here. You need to look like that. No, it's too big, so it. Okay. What is this about? Again, I have all the text of the policy proposal in the slides, but I am not going to read it all. I hope at least some of you have read the complete text. It's long because it's a complex policy proposal. If you try to squeeze it in a shorter text, I don't really think it will work the same. There will need to be a lot of clarifications that the staff will need. So what is the problem? Basically, the current policy that we have in this region, it has an abuse contact, which is called IRT, incident report or something. I don't remember what is it right now. The problem is that it's not mandatory, okay? And I recall it was in the previous meeting, somebody asked how many of these contacts are updated and in AFRINIC, and I think somebody from the staff said less than 1%. So it's ridiculous. If something is not mandatory, it's not going to work, right? And the people is not updating them and so on. So, of course, this means that is totally useless. And what I am trying to solve with the policy is just to make it mandatory. I am not trying to change the way we have that object today or something similar. I am trying to make sure that we have a common object that everybody can refer, and we can refer also to the old name. So it's not deleting the old one. If you have already the old one, that will be a cross-reference among them. That's the main idea. I mentioned this because I think that was one of the staff assessments, and I think I clarified it in the last version, but just in case. What the existing policy is doing is referring to a best practice paper again, which is not deemed as mandatory, and as said, in fact, is not used by the community in general. Okay, so what happens is that in other regions, this is called also abuse C, an abuse mailbox for the email itself. So what I am saying is the same that we did, and again, I am using AFRINIC as an example of previous experience with that, not because I am from AFRINIC or anything like that, or because I am trying to impose which we did in other regions. I think the problem is the same, so the solution typically will become the same as well. So in AFRINIC, they have also the references IRT, and we agreed to keep both names, the old IRT name and the new abuse C. Okay, so that's the thing, and that's minimal impact in the implementation. It's just to facilitate the few people that is using the old one to don't need to renumber or change their applications or whatever. So what basically I'm proposing is a specific change in this section of the policy manual that says that it's mandatory, that there will be a periodic validation, and I am establishing the rules for the staff or the AFRINIC to do that validation. The idea is that if the validation fails, there is a second escalation of the validation, so the staff can contact other contacts of that member in order to correct it, and if there is no contact, take measures. As with any other policy proposal, if the members are not following the policies, the membership agreement will take over and decide what to do. Okay, so that I am not saying here anything on that, just referring to the corresponding sections on the membership agreement. My original expectation is that this can take about 90 days to be implemented. I think the assessment said that it will be just a month and a half, but I don't really think that's a problem. I mean, I am happy to if it takes 1 year, because I understand that it may be complex. That's a problem that the staff should sort out, and I am not really concerned about that. I think it's important to correct the problem, but I am not really concerned in making it very, very quickly. It's better to do the necessary steps and do it correctly. So, again, I am not going to read all the text, that's just making specific points in the key sections. So the actual section 8.1, I am just adding the text so it makes it mandatory. Sorry, okay. Yeah, so this way, that way. Okay, so in the actual text, I am just making small modifications on section 8.1 to make it mandatory. That's the thing here. Then I am having a new section, which is 8.2, which describes what is it. So nothing special to say, just again that is mandatory. Then we have another new section that says what is expected to be. So I am calling this about the abuse mailbox. And what I am saying here, and the important thing here is, it's normal that an ISP has an automated abuse C processing. That's normal. But if the automated don't works, there must be a human responding to it, okay? So the thing here is, the validation must ensure that it's not just fully automated process, because if you send an abuse that cannot be sorted out by the automated process, somebody will need to react. So that's basically what I am trying to say in this section. To describe, when I did the first policy proposal about this in another region, I was trying to describe step by step the process for the staff to follow it. And in that region, they told me, please don't do that. If you describe the step point by point, you are making it as to follow the policy strictly, and there may be something that is not going to work, or some mistake, or whatever. And I agree with that. So what I did is I put that text as a reference. It's just an example, and that's at the end of the policy proposal. But instead, I defined what are the objectives of this validation. Okay? And the objectives are that it's a simple process that ensures that it works, that it helps the help desk taking care of the abuse to make sure that the validation is coming from AFRINIC and is not a phishing or something like that. So giving also security to the people that is going to take care of that validation. The important bit here is probably that the validation time is 15 days. This is one of the major changes from my previous version, because in my previous version I was a bit, let's say, aggressive. I was asking for only 3 working days, and the people said, wow, this is too short. Well, if you have an abuse and somebody is doing a DOS attack on your network, 3 hours is already a lot, but okay, let's keep 15 days. And if in 15 days the validation is not working, then you have an escalation to another 15 days for the rest of the contacts, okay? So that means in total, you should answer in 1 or 2 days probably, but you have 15 days, and if your contact don't work, for example, the employee just left the company, so he's not reading that email, you have additional 15 days for the staff to escalate to the next level, okay? Another interesting thing here is that I believe those periods can be adjusted by the staff. What I am meaning here, when we do this validation for the first time, maybe we discover that 15 days is too short. But after we did that for the second year, it's already too long. So I am giving the attribution to the staff to, depending on how it's going with the time, we make it more efficient. Okay, so if after 1 year everybody has his records updated, maybe we can say instead of 15 days, 10 days is enough. Okay, and that's good for the, let's say, quality of the data that we have in the WHOIS. By the way, I am proposing this just for the view C, but once we have this implemented, one possible idea will be we use this to validate also the rest of the contacts. We may be doing some small changes to this policy to be able to work for the others as well. Okay. Let me remember what it was here, validation. Okay, the thing here, the important bit here is I am proposing in this version, in the previous one was 4 times per year, in this version I am proposing twice per year, so every 6 months. And again, I am giving the staff the attribution to change this timing depending on the situation. For example, I can guess that if I am in the position of the staff, what I will do for the first year is the day that a membership is renewed, validate that member. So I am not validating all the members in one shot, but when they have 1 year since their registration. So I am splitting the workload across 1 year. And maybe the first time, instead of validating twice in a year, I will just validate 1 in a year. And the second year, I will do 2 validations. And maybe in the future, I will do 3 or 4. I don't know. That will be depending on the staff decision and observation on how is it going. As more validations we do, it means extra workload for the community members in the help desk, but they will be used too. I am not asking 1 validation every week. That will not make sense, but maybe instead of 2, 3, or 4 per year. But of course, it means again an increase in the security somehow of the region and the accuracy of the data. Okay, so that's the reason for giving the staff the opportunity to change that. If this is not working and somebody from the community has an abuse and an ISP is not responding, even if it was validated previously, it means that maybe the employee that was taking care of that has left from the company in the period between one validation and the next. So I am giving the community opportunity to tell AFRINIC, please revalidate because something is not working, and that can be also automated, okay? So there is not a big problem with that. And of course, if the automation doesn't work, then escalate as described in the previous slide. And this is the last slide with text from the proposal, but again, this is just an example. It's not something that the staff need to follow, but I don't have in the form of the policy submission in AFRINIC. I have it in other regions, but not here. I don't have a section for additional information. So I made my own additional information section, okay? So this is just an example about a possible implementation. And this, all the information that I am trying to describe in this policy proposal, not just this slide, but also the others, is the work of the last 2 years of conversations with people from all around the world about abuse matters. So it's not something that I made from scratch in 1 day. It's really collecting information, and every bit in the text has a reason. You may agree or not, but I really want to tell you that I have really considered every step to be useful for the community. What else? References. It has been accepted, basically almost the same text in AFRINIC, and is under discussion in LACNIC. Is not yet, even if I say here, is not yet officially under discussion in RIPE, but we have a similar proposal, and I had discussion with the chairs, and well, we are working on that, and I presented, I did a short presentation in the previous RIPE meeting about this idea. So it's something that it's going to come in 1 or 2 weeks probably, officially. A staff assessment, in the previous version, I think the staff was misunderstanding the reference to IRT, and they were expecting that I was duplicating it, but I think now it's clear. So now it's clear that it's not just duplicating the data, it's just making a pointer so Never mind you call it IRT or abuse C, is the same. Okay? Is that clear for you now? Okay. The staff suggested section 8.7, which is additional information, should not be part of the policy proposal, but as I just said, I don't have a specific place in the form for the policy submission to put that. So I think it's easy if they want to move it to the, I don't know, the summary or whatever, to move it, it's not a problem, because it's, even if it's policy text, it's informational, it's not something mandatory, so I don't think that creates a problem for adoption of the policy proposal. And there were also other minor changes, I don't recall of them, that I think I have addressed as well in this version. Not sure if you want to comment. I am done, so I am not sure if you want to comment something specific about the staff assessment, but yeah.
Yeah, hello, this is Alan Barrett. Just question for clarification. We currently have an IRT object which can contain all kinds of things, including an abuse mailbox, right? You're not proposing to change that at all. You're proposing to make abuse C be a mandatory attribute in other objects like INET nums, INET 6 nums, ORT nums, that points to the IRT object.
Exactly.
Is that right?
You could reference to the same set of data using abuse C or IRT.
Okay.
So it's kind of synonym, you say in English synonym?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a pointer, one to the other. So the applications that today use ERT will keep working. Applications that use in the future abuse C, which should be the preferred one, will keep working as well. So both of them will refer to the same set of data. And in addition to that, now you are going to make it mandatory and validating it. That's it.
Okay. And are you also proposing to add an abuse mailbox as a mandatory attribute in all the other things, or only to point to IRT, and IRT is where you store the abuse mailbox?
The idea is that you have the same for every INET num that you have. If they are, because they hierarchically, they can be inherit, okay? So if you have 3 different objects, you typically will point to the same, but in some cases I see networks where the responsible for the AS abuses is one person, while the responsible for the abuses related to IPv4 is another, and IPv6 is another. So it may be the same, it may be different depending on each case.
Okay. And then about the inheritance, let's say you have a less specific block, and inside that you have a more specific block. Will it be allowed to leave the abuse C blank or omit it from the more specific, and it must be inherited somehow by some automated process?
By default will be inherited. By default will be inherited, but you should allow the ISP or the LIR to change it for more specifics, because it may happen that there is a specific person to take care of this block from your whole block, right? So it should be able to have a more specific abuse C contact.
Yep, okay. If we mark that as mandatory in the schema of the database, then I suppose the server can automatically fill it in and implement the inheritance on the server side at update time.
Exactly.
Not at lookup time, but at update time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think the CEO addressed many points in the staff assessment, but before we open the mic for comment and question, I think Ernest have to...
You have something else?
No, the issues I had are exactly what Alan has actually pointed out. That was the main point of discussion in our assessment, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we open the queue for questions. Please, this side.
Hello, Sparky from JP Cert. This is a question and comment. So, as a cybersecurity guy, I'm generally for any policy helping making internet secure. and contact information validation will really help any African team or anyone outside of this region to reach out the source of program. With that said, I still have some unclarity. So my concern is what will happen if network owner, ISP, fail to respond periodical email by AFRINIC? Are you going to make a blacklist of not very responsible ISP, or you're going to ban those ISP? Because you know, I understand you intentionally left the room of interpretation of this policy.
Not really.
Okay.
I didn't mention that specific text because we don't have time to read all the text, but there is a specific text that says that basically the access to the resources, I think it's called my AFRINIC or something like that, will be blocked if there is no validation. So what that means, if you are an ISP and the employee responsible for the abuse is left and nobody changed that, and the rest of the contacts also are invalid, in that case, AFRINIC will block your access and will allow you only to update this data. So what happens basically is the new person in that company taking care over the previous one will realize, hey, I cannot change the data in my account. What they will do then? Contact AFRINIC. Oh, you have it blocked because it's not updated. But you can update it and then it's revalidated. Done.
So that's the consequence of not responding email. Okay.
So it's your resources get blocked to not your resources. Your access to your resources modifications get blocked except for updating this. Okay. So once you update this, it gets revalidated and you get the full access again. And of course, and that's something that is not defined in the policy. The policy calls to the membership agreement. If there is an ISP that after 1 year or whatever timing decides the membership agreement or the staff or the board is not responding and not validating the data, obviously they can get the resources reclaimed. But that's a normal thing in general in the membership agreement. If you are not paying, if you are not following policies or something like that, you can get your resources reclaimed. That's nothing new from this policy.
Then my one last comment is I'm more comfortable, you know, this policy itself describing or explaining what will happen, the account suspension or something like that, explicitly mentioned in this policy so that we can share the consequence among community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jody, just a quick one. I would like to read again your the clause from what you just said.
Yep.
Lack of compliance will initially lead to the blocking of that account's access to its resources. It's not so clear what you mean by block as written. I've understood it a bit better from your explanation.
Yes.
But, so what you mean is that we shall block access to accessing the member's account to do any updates. But it could also be interpreted differently. Blocking access to resources could also be seen in different light as maybe either taking them back or the resources are unusable for the member. I think there might...
It's access.
Yes.
Access to my AFRINIC,
Yes.
right? I am trying to find my own text.
Your text is what I'm reading.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I am trying to find in my screen so I can read it.
So blocking the account's access.
Account access,
Yes.
account access, that's it. Account access to its resources. So it means your resources are still valid, but you cannot access the resources to modify something, to manage, exactly. Yeah, I think, well, from my perspective it's clear, but maybe we need to add something. But it's access to the account.
Okay, I think this point is clear. So, yeah, go ahead.
Ok, Grégoire et Oumi, je vais parler en français.
Oh, I don't have.
Now, about the proposal, as soon as AFRINIC is involved in the accreditation, but I don't see any involvement of AFRINIC when it comes to the use of resources, when we have fraudulent uses of the resources. Is there any section or any article that provides for any decision to be taken when we find out that the members are using some fraudulent data, and what should AFRINIC do to face this problem?
Merci, Monsieur Sami.
Thank you, Mr. Sami. I have two observations about section 8.6 of this policy. Now, I notice some people who are supporting the policy, but I don't know whether they have read all of the sections of this policy with regards, or in order to understand that I did understand. Let me give an example about someone who is complaining, who writes of the abuse address of any resources, and he doesn't get any response. And then can he send this to AFRINIC? So what can AFRINIC do in this policy is to check out the validation of the mail. So AFRINIC would send a mail to find out whether the mail is valid or not. So he responds to AFRINIC, but he did not answer to the one who has undergone the loss, and he didn't respond to the victim to correct this damage. So normally what should be done here? Normally, this policy should allow AFRINIC to go beyond this simple response, and to what extent the person who is violating these rules, what can he do to resolve this problem? So we have to go as far as settling the problem, and not to stop at the level of checking the validity of the mail. We have to make sure here that the person who is who's done the abuse has managed to resolve the problem. My second comment here is about this section at the level of the last sentence of section 8.6, where it is mentioned that the person, if he or she doesn't answer to all of the requests of AFRINIC or to the plaintiff, now which corresponds to one of the sections that we have in the policy review. Now here we can say that to revoke the resource of the person, and that AFRINIC could revoke the source of the person. I find that this is highly important simply because we have this option at the level of the review of the policy, but it is very frightening for the people, and people would accept it quite quietly, and if this abuse is not valid, we are going to revoke the resources.
Okay, Madhvi, I think remote participation.
Yes. Owen DeLong from DeLong Consulting. So his comment is we should pick one name for the object and stick to that. I don't care if it's IRT or abuse C, but having multiple names will only spawn confusion. I do support the idea of contact validation for all contact records. Another one from Mark Elkins, POSIX Systems. I agree with Owen's point. We need an abuse contact on all contact records. I'd prefer if all contact records could potentially point to a single abuse contact though, so it's easier to maintain, in brackets, if necessary. And yes, so from Owen, in response to the current commenter, AFRINIC can't put itself in the role of internet police. If the contact responds to AFRINIC, the contact is valid. If they are not responsive to others, then that is a business decision made by said network operator. In such a case, the most likely and most effective consequence would be depeering by the community.
Okay, Community chat from Togo. I'll ask question in French.
Thank you, Jody, for this presentation. I do understand that you are a global citizen, and so am I, but in section 8.5 of your proposal, I notice that it is written here, and I quote,
That's a typo in that version.
So it is not right policy?
No, of course not.
Okay.
Should I?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to mention the same thing because on the website you have RIPE-CC there, and then it is not the best for someone who is offering himself as a mentor for policy development in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I said, I am working in the same policy proposal in different regions, so probably I mistyped one region or the other. It's really my fault for not reading twice, but believe me.
I agree, but you know, when you are putting something on the net, please, let's be meticulous and avoid, because...
Thank you very much, Mark. Lou, please, go ahead.
Hi, Luhan from the Risk Series. So a few comments. First of all, follow the Sparky comments. The consequence of not validated is abuse C. It's obviously not clear that you can block access to resource. That sounds to me you're causing an operational issue. So you basically take off the internet, take off the network off the net. That is one interpretation could be seriously leads to breakdown of the internet, which is definitely shouldn't be the case. Block access to AFRINIC, which is a web service provided by AFRINIC as part of the member services. That is one acceptable solution, or in the other hand, that we can develop a more user-friendly way that, you log into my AFRINIC, then, you basically redirect to a screen that please validate your abuse C. Something like that, be more user-friendly, rather than say, hey, if you don't do this, we do that. And that you're causing problem with companies which might just be an innocent mistake in the very beginning. And also, like the second point, I would like to follow up with Alvin's points about it's a business decision. So we have in this region or globally internet, basically in different jurisdictions, we have laws about how you deal with abuse. You have laws dealing with different type of abuse. When abuse can be considered as abuse in one country, they might consider totally legitimate way of using internet in the other. And there's absolutely no way to put AFRINIC in a position to judge is that right way for them to respond to abuse or not. We shouldn't force people to respond it. We are registry. So all this we do is we make sure that the email address, the abuse content in the database is accurate. So you can actually use that email to reach the operator who is running the network. But we don't guarantee they will respond to it. It's not our problem. Right, or even they will even agree with your complaint. Even they think, some countries will allow spam. For example, US will allow canned spam as long as you put the unsubscribe button there. And if there's certain ISP in that particular country would feel no reason to respond to some of the spam community emails, they are legally and freely to do so. It's not AFRINIC in a position to force or making laws that we don't know how to do that. So that is to my comment. And in general, I support the validation of UC. It's make the database more accurate. It is the job of the registry itself. But don't go beyond that. We stay at points that we validate the content and that's it. That's the only job of AFRINIC. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on this side?
Yes, this is Jean-Robert. Now, my two questions are for AFRINIC, and depending on AFRINIC response, I may have a third question. So I'm trying to evaluate how this can be enforced, like make sure that we have an accurate ABUC in AFRINIC database. So my question to AFRINIC is, what is the current quality rate for response for the current WIS database update that you are conducting?
Alan Barrett, let me try to take that. We do not validate abuse mailboxes by sending mail and checking if they respond, but I like the idea of doing that. It's something that we should certainly do in the future, and I think even if this policy doesn't pass, we will probably take that up. Generally on contact information, we've contacted 100% of our members to ask them to verify their contact details in the WHOIS database, and about 91% of them have confirmed that the information is accurate. So that means they've told us that we've checked and we confirm the information is accurate. And next year we will continue contacting them again, and hopefully we'll get that number above 91%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, avec les mains around, so still in French. Donc là, je vais parler cette fois-ci en tant que
Here I'm going to talk as a co-author of the anti-abuse policy that Marcos mentioned this morning and that was accepted in the RIPE region. Just to be clear about this policy that we proposed for the RIPE region doesn't go as far as required in terms of verification of the validity of the mail. So there are some automatic procedures that could be introduced by the RIPE in order to check out this aspect. But the only comment is related to the sanctions that any member could undergo in case of non-validity. To be a little bit more clear, it's not the fact that the anti-abuse is not valid or that we don't respect these policies. Now, this is not the aspect that would automatically lead to solutions, but now for a significant period of time, that's 6 or 12 months, the member of the local registry did not show enough cooperation with the regional sub-registry. This is exactly to our vision in the RIPE that would lead probably to some lesions. The closure of the link or whatever is a relationship with the regional register in order to follow or not to follow this policy. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have to close the queue with 3 gentlemen here and Alain from other side. Alain, go ahead.
Yeah. Alain Aina Wakren. So I want to agree with Owen and suggest that we keep to the IRT object to make it easier and simpler. And the other point is that it's about, okay, and Evie just said it. If you read the policy proposal, okay, we need the abuse contact. We want then the abuse contact to be accurate, but you went further saying that there is escalation process. So if you look at this, say, if I'm reporting abuse to Alan, then Alan is not responding. I escalate to Deole as a parent registry. Okay, then Deole will just check if the mail, the abuse mail from Alan is responding. So then you can ask why? Because the real problem here is dealing with the abuse, not just checking if the email is valid or not. So that's why if we want to go further to the escalation, all of these things, this is what bring people to, okay, maybe then AFRINIC should also make sure that the abuse reported have been dealt with. But what we are saying here, but then what people say here, AFRINIC should not be the gendarme. It will be a business decision. But this remind me 2010 when we were discussing this was the agreement. AFRINIC should be gendarme. Then we said in this case, let's put it as optional and AFRINIC should develop a best practice, etc., etc. Because what is the end goal of spending all this time if we cannot make sure that the reported abuse are dealt with? So I want just to bring this kind of context. So if we want to go up to validation, escalation, all of these things, so where do we stop? Because AFRINIC role is to make sure that the numbers are used appropriately. And if they are abused to the numbers, yes, AFRINIC can intervene, but AFRINIC not being the gendarme. But if the numbers are not being used correctly, they are botnet, they are fraudulently used, AFRINIC can intervene. So if we want to go there, but AFRINIC would not be gendarme or police, whatever, so but maybe we need to cut the police a little bit or stop where it needed. Otherwise, we can imagine so many things.
Thank you.
Oui, Arnaud, CTO Togolais. Oui, j'ai aussi deux préoccupations.
I have two major concerns here. One has been mentioned in the intervention of Mr. Alain, and the second is probably a question mark compared to the section of the policy. I noticed in the presentation earlier on that Mr. Jody has used section 8.7. Whereas I only see 8.6, which is the last section of the policy. So where does the section 8.7 come from? Thank you. And I wanted to make it clear with regards to the necessity of the policy's technical element, and that the staff here could, as Alan has said, it could take care of this abuse part, making mandatory the IRT section. Thank you.
I just have two concerns. The first one is what is the timeline for a block account to be revalidated? That's the first one. And the second one is if an investigation is carried out on an account and was wrongly blocked, then what next? How the business side of it now, how does an entity get, maybe, I don't know, maybe because business operations are hampered, does he get, how is the compensation process? That's my two concerns actually. Thank you.
Esponsali, a board member, not speaking for the board. I would like to understand the impact of this policy. For example, my AFRINIC is also used for voting. Resource members use my AFRINIC to vote. So would one of the impact be that resource member would not be able to vote? Thank you.
I am not sure if that question is for me, because I am not.
You are the author of the proposal.
Yeah, but I mean, I am not understanding if you mean at implementation time or what.
You said you mentioned, I think, in one of the slides, you mentioned that you should block access to my AFRINIC.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And my AFRINIC is used for resource members to vote. So a resource member who is non-compliant won't be able to vote because of this.
Yeah, that's the idea. If I am going to take the opportunity to respond also to the previous question, because I think it's in line. The timing is 15 days for the validation of the abuse C contact, and then if it doesn't work, 15 additional days for the escalation to other contacts. Okay, so the timing in total is you will get blocked after 1 month of not responding at all to the validation, and you get blocked only the access to your resources. So why are you going to ask a compensation if you are not responding in 1 month, and you don't lose your resources, you lose the capability to manage them? Okay, but it's your obligation to follow the policies. If we start asking for compensation for anything, we can ask compensation because AFRINIC don't give me a slash 24 after the next phase of exhaustion, okay? So it will be the same.
Sorry, I was not talking about compensation. Maybe my English is not good. I could switch to French. Je voulais parler du droit de vote.
I wanted to talk about the right to vote, and for AFRINIC, I would like to know if this aspect will be impacted. I'm not for neither for nor against the proposal.
Okay. Here. The other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, but we closed the queue for asking questions, so we don't have time. I'm sorry.
I don't understood very well the question about 8.7. 8.7 is part of the policy text, but not as a mandatory text. I don't know how to say really. I explained it at the beginning. We can move this to another part of the policy proposal. It's just an example and clarification of how is the process or a possible process that AFRINIC can follow. Okay, so we are not deciding, even if we decide we don't like this or we like this, it says clearly this is just an example, so it's not something mandatory. Then another question was...
Can you take it from the proposal?
We can take it and put it in the summary or something. I mean, I don't care. The ideal way will be that the form for the policy submission has one section in general from now on for additional information, but I don't have that. Okay? The other question was related to what happens if the staff need to take a decision when there is an escalation. So an ISP is trying to send an abuse and is not getting response. The idea is that the staff, if it gets escalated to them, they can check and verify if what happens, and I described that in the text, if what happens is that the ISP is doing a tweak and only responding the abuse when it comes from AFRINIC. That's the intent. Okay, so it's not saying AFRINIC will close your resources or reclaim your resources because you are not answering to abuse reports of child pornography or spam or whatever. No, I am not saying that. Because, as it has been said, it may be different in different countries. The legislation can be different. But we need to ensure that the bad guys, because most of you, I am sure almost all of you, will follow the policies and not do anything bad. But a bad guy will play tricks to verify which AFRINIC that I am playing good, but when they are really dealing with an abuse, they will never respond. If they respond, sorry, in my country this is not illegal, AFRINIC cannot do anything about that, of course. But at least we need to make sure that they are responding to anyone and not just to the validation done by AFRINIC. That's the intent. Let me see if there is anything else. Regarding the IRT or abuse C, I am not saying in the policy that one or the other cannot be deleted. So if AFRINIC decides that the IRT is not being used and they want to delete it, after 1 year or 2 years, they can do it. What I am asking is implement abuse C, and maybe after 2 years, nobody was using already IRT and we can delete it. The policy says don't do this. So that's allowed, that's at the discretion of the staff. And I think that needs time to see if somebody was really using. It's very easy to have statistics about how many calls are being done for IRT. If the number of calls is once in a year, delete it. Or even if it's just 100 of them versus 10 hundreds of the other one, okay? And I think I have responded to most of the questions. Some of them are a bit mixed, but I think I have responded to all of them.
Okay, we'll give Badfi for remote participation, then 30 minutes for the young lady. 30 seconds, sorry.
Willy Manga, in his own personal capacity, as he has a suggestion, Each time there's a face-to-face meeting, AFRINIC can check with members on site if their contacts are accurate. A question though, are we sure it will not increase workload on AFRINIC team? And then Owen DeLong from DeLong Consulting. In response to Alain, AFRINIC is not the police. If the abuse is a violation of law, then law enforcement should deal with that if the network operator doesn't. AFRINIC's obligation ends at the maintenance of accurate registry records.
My name is Eukaria from Nigeria. Sir, I want to know the level of access given to a staff that works for a company that is in charge of the contact abuse. Should in case the staff leaves the organization, even if the AFRINIC blocks the organization for that time before they gain another staff to take over the position, will the staff whom has left the organization be able to still penetrate the organization that he or she has left?
I think that's a question that is not really related to this policy. If I understand correctly, what you mean is...
Like in terms of security.
Yeah, exactly. You are asking a security concern in general for the MyAfrinic. If somebody leaves an organization and nobody tells to AFRINIC, that's not blocked. I don't know.
No, like once the person leaves the organization, the person who is in charge of the contact policy leaves the organization, and then another person takes over. I'm asking the level of access that has been given to that person. Can the person still operate the company even when the person is no more working with the company?
Removed the person as a contact with access to MyAfrinic, the person would still have access.
Exactly.
The answer to the question is, like, would the person still have access to a company mailbox if it's left? If you haven't taken the privileges away, the person would have access. So that's the responsibility of the member. But
that's not related to this proposal at all. It's a generic problem of security if you fire an employee.
So Alan, do you have a comment?
Yes, I have several points. Let me first react to the security thing. If somebody leaves a company, AFRINIC doesn't know that. So we're not going to somehow automatically block their access. Some other person at the company must tell us. And for most of our members, they have multiple contacts, and so if the technical contact leaves but the admin contact is still there, the admin contact can ask us to change things. We also have a fallback method where if they lose access to everything, maybe they forget their passwords, we have a way where we can exchange documents to verify that, you know, to grant them access again by sending us some kind of authenticated documents. I don't want to go into the details. Then about voting, somebody was talking about do they lose their vote, and I think SM tried to clarify that. So we're going to we might potentially have a problem here, because the same MyAfrinic portal that they use to access or manage their resources is the same portal that they use to vote in AFRINIC elections. I guess on the implementation side, we could allow them to still vote even though they cannot change their resources. My question to the policy author is that what you intend?
Yes. What I am restricting is the access to modify the resources or to maintain the resources. But of course, I didn't know that you use the same login for the voting. But I guess that's an implementation detail that it can be managed at an implementation time.
Okay, fine. So when we implement this, assuming it passes, we make sure the login still works for other things, but does not work for managing resources.
Exactly.
Okay, we can do that. Right. And then, yeah, comment about the name of the object. We've got an object called IRT, which has a whole bunch of things in it. And we also have an attribute which goes into other objects which points to it. And that attribute in most cases is called MNT-IRT. I think you're proposing to call it abuse-C. I think it would be better if we have only one. And so if you want us to run some kind of a bulk edit process to go through the whole database and everywhere there's an MNT IRT to rename it to Abuse C, we can do that, but it would be good if the policy says so. I don't just want to do it without policy support.
Right. Anyway, I really think we should keep bot names for a simple reason. Some companies, maybe in Africa, maybe outside, have applications that use those contacts, and if we delete an existing one, we may break the applications, and I don't see the harm of, from now on, if the policy get consensus, use Abuse C as the recommended one, but keep the others, so automated applications still work. I don't see the harm, and I don't think there is a much implementation work, maybe a couple of extra programmer hours, but I don't really think it's that much complex. And we'll avoid a lot of brokenness using older contacts.
So I think you're asking for us on the service side, every time there's some kind of an update, if somebody adds an attribute or edits an attribute called Abuse C, for us to duplicate the same information in another attribute.
It's not necessary to duplicate, it's a pointer.
Right, but to have 2 pointers under 2 different names.
No problem, you can have 20 pointers into a single object.
Of course we can, but that might end up being confusing for the users. I understand your point about breaking applications. What about some kind of a...
Maybe as a temporary thing, keep the old ones and announce to the community that they will be deprecated at some point. Something like that may work. If you prefer to keep just a single one. You can even do some statistics of the usage, the real usage of the existing ones, because if they are not used, there is no point to keep them a single day, right?
It's hard to tell whether anyone uses them. We can tell whether the data is there in the database.
You can get the statistics of...
We can't easily measure who reads the database.
Well,
hello. Could you please allow me to break this conversation from here, and we have another platform, which is the RBD list, to continue this fruitful conversation on the list. And this is, I think, our decision to. There are so many issues still need more looking in depth on it. So we decide to retain this proposal back to the mailing list, but we urge you to be active there as you are active here in the mic, and make the proposal more strong and a more precise text, so we can move it forward after that.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Please, I will strongly suggest the people that has been contributing here to go to the mailing list and explain their points so we can clarify it better.
That's
Thank
what
you.
we expect from you, Jordi. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Our next proposal will be the Internet